Stanley Richard Topel. I was born on January 5, 1935.
All right. So how old are you as we're recording this?
I am now 90 years of age.
All right. And Grandma?
I am Mae Alice Hazy Topel. I was born on May 23rd, 1936.
All right. And how long have the two of you been married?
70 years.
When we were riding a bus together, he was mean to me. He thought that's the way he would get my attention.
Did it work?
It must have.
Well, I had 3 other guys that were losers. So I thought at least he had a family life, didn't drink, didn't smoke.
Grandpa, what about you?
I was impressed with her family. They were churchgoers and had a very strong family unit, which I thought was important, and our family likewise was very strong that way. My dad had a job building bridges when I was in high school, and then he worked as in a warehouse loading trucks for one of the national food companies. He couldn't go to church on Sunday, but my mother insisted that my sister and I and my mom would go to church every Sunday anyway, and so that became very important to me as I was thinking of the future.
Well, like I said, 3 people one time, and that was it.
I would have dates, not really what we would call dates today, but back at that time we did, where I would take a girl to a high school play or to a football game, or back at that time I would come home from college on most weekends, and we would go to the movies. Before that, when I was in high school, I went to a lot of dances simply because the girls liked to dance, and I really never learned how to dance. So I was kind of a wallflower in that respect. So I really didn't fit into much of the crowd of that day. Actually, we didn't start dating until after she had graduated. And at that point, I had kind of thought that we were never going to get together. And she wrote me a letter over summer in which she asked for a picture of my graduation, which was kind of custom back in those days. You would share your graduation pictures with people that ask you, and so I thought that was kind of in a strange way. I mean, we were over. The school was out, I was going to college, and she had another year of high school, but that is really the invitation that started our dating.
Okay. Okay. So Grandma kind of made the first move there to make it more serious.
That is correct.
All right. Good job, Grandma. Way to go.
Obviously, I did get her attention while on the bus.
Even negative attention works, right?
And when I say intention or attention, it was just kind of little things that I would tease her about, or mess with her hair because I would be sitting maybe in a seat behind her on the bus, and those kind of things. It wasn't any prankish kind of thing that we might be inclined to think of today.
What do you remember about that, Grandma?
I remember his friend said, "You better behave yourself. She has some big brothers."
And when I met them, they were big. Our dating started actually in 1953, and living out in the rural area, there was basically two things to do. And that was either go to a movie, and almost every little town had their own movie theater at that time. Or the other thing was to go bowling. We generally went to the theater primarily because the bowling ended up, even at by those days prices, a more expensive date.
That's a long time ago.
And that was one of our major dating then, because I would come home every weekend because I attended college in St. Paul, and as a result of that, we saw a lot of movies during those few years that we dated.
Yeah.
Plus they were in black and white. They didn't have quite the impact that they do today.
One time we had gone to visit his friend, which was quite a few miles away, and when we came home, the place was cold. So what do? Go to a movie till it's warmed up.
I don't think that there ever was a moment when I felt that this was the one and only. I believe that the Lord was directing, and therefore we seemed to be compatible in so many different ways, as I had mentioned before, and I felt that we could make a life together if she was willing to work through this. Her brother warned me on wedding night, "You may have to make some trips back home because she's a homebody and she has never been out of the state before. And here on the first trip out, she's not going to spend it a few days. We're going to be in Seward, Nebraska, away from the family and friends for 6 weeks."
Well, what about you? How did you know Grandpa was the one?
Like I said, the other 2 or 3 were losers, so I had my pick.
Okay, I guess I better answer that one. She said that she would not marry me until she had a certain big amount of money between us, a home and a ring. So I borrowed my sister's dollhouse. It was the house. The cereal boxes had at that time Confederate money in big bills, and so as a Christmas gift in 1955, I gave her, wrapped up in a beautiful bow in a big box, the dollhouse with all kinds of the Confederate money strewn about, and instead of a doorbell, the ring was attached to the door. There was no getting down on my knees to propose, and that was in front of her entire family because the family always gathered on Christmas Eve to exchange gifts. And so the entire family knew immediately that we were engaged.
So had you talked about marriage before the proposal on Christmas?
We had talked about it, but not setting any specific date or anything in, oh, this is when it's going to happen or anything like that. that was my way of satisfying her desires.
So, Grandma, when you opened that present, what was that like?
I think I took it down in the basement real quietly. And then, of course, my family suspected something.
That was Christmas Eve, and we were married the following June 5th. And the wedding came about because we had been talking seriously, and Concordia College in St. Paul for men was a 2-year college. At that point, you either went to River Forest, Illinois for the last 2 years or Seward, Nebraska for the last 2 years there. And I had written to River Forest because a lot of my classmates from St. Paul were going there, including the fellow that turned out to be our best man and the soloist in the wedding party. And so that was my choice. However, when I told them that there was a good chance I would be married, they rejected my application because they had no housing for married students. And so instead, we were forced then to go to Seward. Well, Seward was about 400 miles away, and I had been, for the past 2 years, coming home every weekend, which was a nice arrangement. Well, I wasn't going to be coming home every weekend, and we decided we weren't going to be separated for any amount of time. And so we would get married before I would start school in the fall. When we went to meet with the pastor to make the arrangements and set the time and everything for his schedule, as we were talking, he said, "I understand that you're going to graduate very soon from Concordia." Yes, that is in the plan. "Would you consider teaching in our elementary school next year, starting in September?" Well, obviously I couldn't go to school in Seward if I was going to be teaching for them. However, before I was certified in the state of Minnesota to teach, there were certain curriculum courses that I needed. And so I then had to take a summer school that summer in order to qualify to teach in Minnesota. And so that then made our wedding, which we had planned on pretty early in June or in that area anyway, pushed up to when does Seward start class? And that's when we decided that it was going to be the Sunday afternoon, June 5th, because classes started on June 6th, Monday, but we were 1 day late in getting there. We arrived on Tuesday, June 7th.
The reception was in the church basement.
Talk
after
about
the
your wedding dress first.
ceremony. And my sister was 23 years older than I, and she went to Minneapolis with me to pick out the dress. I had an aunt that lived in Minneapolis, and we visited there lots of times, and she did things with me.
Nice.
For our wedding present, my folks bought us a mobile home. It was a very, very strong, sturdy metal home for $1,000 back at that price at that time. It was one of the best ones that were made. However, in 1955, there was very few mobile homes with indoor plumbing in terms of showers or bathrooms. But we found that Seward had a tremendous trailer park, and we were able to back our home right next to the bathroom facilities, the washroom and the wash facilities. And so this was, you might say, really roughing it in our early years, but it was also a very economical way to begin married life.
And the mobile home was 28 feet long. It wasn't very big.
Single family
We
house.
got rid of it in the summer of 1957, and as Matthew knows, I keep track of our expenses, and I was able to average our cost of living for that almost 2 years at $25 a month for rent and light and heat. I was teaching at Mayor Zion Lutheran for that first year. I had signed a contract for a second year, at which time in April of 1956, the draft board informed me that I was going to be drafted. Grandma's uncle was chairman of the draft board in Carver County. And so we went to see him as to what would be his advice on this matter. The only problem was I lived less than a mile into Hennepin County. Hennepin County includes Minneapolis. The draft numbers between Carver County and Hennepin County for the war of Korea in the 1950s was much larger in Hennepin County. And therefore, with my birthday, as we said before, on January 5th, my name would go into the lottery on January 5th. And whatever number of young men they needed at the end of January and February and March, they would pull that number of names out of whatever bucket or what they used to draw the names, because it was a lottery system. Her uncle said my chances of avoiding being drafted into the service were impossible. So he said, I will go to the school board, I will break your contract because you will not finish next year anyway. And my advice is to go back to Seward and get your degree, my bachelor's degree. After 2 years I had my associate's. And then you are out of the draft call entirely.
Because you were a student, a full-time student, you were.
And then after that, I was a full-time teacher, which made me ineligible for draft status too.
Okay.
And so as a result, his words were, go and finish your degree. You seem to like teaching and you were obviously well accepted. So why don't you make that your life's career and not think about the service? And so that's what we did. So we went back in summer school. I took a couple of night courses, and we were there in December of 1957 for that school year when Mark was born. And
I was born in 56.
in 56, I'm sorry, thank you. And then in May of 1957, after only a number of summers, one full year, I was able to graduate with my bachelor's degree. And as a result, I was eligible then to be called into what has been my life profession at that point. So I really didn't miss 2 years of schooling. I just earned a nice income during that 1 year and was able to finish along with my classmates anyway. It was purely accidental.
Oh, all right. So my next question then is, how did you know you were ready for kids? Did you feel ready for kids, or it just kind of, here it is?
I guess your answer would be Mark came and he was 10 pounds, 12 and a half ounces. He was big for his birth age, and he was a bundle of joy. And so why stop with one when it seemed to be a real blessing to have someone like Mark in the house.
All right. Grandma, how did you feel when you found out that you were going to have Uncle Mark?
How did I feel? I guess sort of excited
Good.
and a lot of questions. And we had a good doctor and he answered all the questions.
And one thing that made Mark in many ways very special, the doctor back in Seward allowed both of us to be in the delivery room for that. And so once Mark was born, he was handed to me. And talking about our second child, which is your father, Tim, we were then living in Detroit, and I went to any number of hospitals and doctors, and every one of them said, no, we do not permit husbands, fathers, or whatever in the waiting room or in the delivery room.
Wait until he turns around again.
For my dad, for the second one.
Yep.
Okay.
He was tiny.
Now, okay, so Uncle Mark was big, 10 pounds, 12. Do you remember how big my dad was?
It was 6 pounds, 10 ounces.
Very similar size to Hannah when she
Yeah.
was born. How long was the labor and delivery? Like, do you remember how many hours between when you got to the hospital and when you had the child?
Not really.
Yeah.
I can answer part of that. Go ahead.
I mean, I was very comfortable. I was in no hurry.
That's good. That's good.
But her water broke on June 4th, and we went to the hospital expecting that that would be the day for delivery. And they sent us back home and said, you're not even close to his being born, or at that time we didn't have any idea who, what sex the second birth would be. But so they sent us home, and he was born then a whole day later. So there was quite a span in between.
You brought up you didn't know the sex of my dad. Was that an option when you were having
No.
the kids?
No.
Yeah, you
We
just
knew none
all
of
had
them.
to wait until they came out.
Yep. Yes, that was in Northwest General Hospital, which isn't there anymore. And the reason I was able to be in the delivery room, we had the doctor's son in Nativity Lutheran School where I was then teaching. And so the practice of allowing fathers in the delivery room was not encouraged, but it wasn't as strong a no as it had been 4 years before. It was during the time of transition.
Mark had a heart murmur, and he had to be checked. He was checked 12 years, and the doctor said, as long as his lips aren't blue and he's doing good, don't come back anymore.
But I might interject on that one too. He was born in Seward, and I took him in for his 6-month checkup to our local doctor in Detroit. And the doctor examined him and said, I think you should take him to Children's Hospital maybe tomorrow. Well, he was perfectly okay as we looked at him. And that's when we discovered as a real shock that he had the heart murmur. Up until that time, we felt that he was completely normal.
Well, what it was, when he was born, usually there's a hole in your heart and that is to close. His did not close.
Well, first of all, it was customary back at that time that you didn't have health insurance. So when you're facing the problem of heart for a child, you have no idea of what the cost could be. And even though when we're talking in terms of cost at that time compared to today, it would seem very small, yet in proportion it would have been a very big factor to consider. And the uncertainty. I mean, we expected everything was fine, and you take him into a new doctor and he tells you to take him to Children's Hospital soon. Was just, it wasn't something that you even imagined could happen. Because when Debbie was born in Northwest Hospital and I was there and everything was fine, she was a very beautiful little girl, and we had visitors during the day, and that afternoon I was told by the nurse not to leave. The doctor needs to talk to both of us. And so, you know, what's happening now? And when he came in, he said that neither one of her lungs had opened, and therefore they wanted to rush her down to Children's Hospital immediately. Well, talking about her lungs not opening, I know history, and I knew it already back at that time in 1964. And so just exactly 1 year before that, President Kennedy's newborn baby had died of the very same traumatic experience. So that was another real blow when the kids were so young to deal with.
But it made a difference because she was over 8 pounds and the Kennedy baby was tiny.
Oh yes, they had to be. It was either they were, her lungs did not open, so she was getting no oxygen the normal way. She was in what at that time we would call an iron lung. Mm-hmm. And we gave permission to the doctors to move her, but before they moved her, I baptized her. And the head nurse was her sponsor and witness then of that baptismal act. And she was taken down Friday night. She was in Children's Hospital all day Saturday. Sunday, I went to church alone because Mom was in one hospital and Debbie was in the other. And we had a visiting pastor. And Harvey Newman was our organist at Nativity, who's a family friend. And they had visited on Saturday. And he right away was smiling and said, "How's the newborn?" And I said, "She's in Children's Hospital, her lungs didn't open." And so the pastor, visiting pastor, right away latched onto it, said a prayer for us in the sacristy, and said, "We will offer a prayer for her." The prayer was offered sometime between 10 and 10:30 Sunday morning. And when I came home with the two boys, Mrs. Miller, our next door neighbor, invited us over right away for Sunday dinner, and she said, "I'm going to take care of the boys while you go and visit your wife and daughter. Well, there was no point in visiting our daughter, but I did spend quite a bit of time with mom, grandma, and I came home then maybe 2:33 in the afternoon. I picked up the boys, and as we're entering the house, the telephone is ringing. And I picked it up, and the voice said, "Call your doctor immediately." So I called, they gave me the number, and he said, "When can you pick up your daughter?" It still didn't dawn on me, that it was positive. And in the conversation then, we found out that they had checked her at 10 o'clock that morning, and she was still with the lung problem. They went back at 10:30 and was cured.
Parents are to be parents. They're not to have the children boss them around and tell them what to do, what they are doing now.
So it's important for parents to be the authority
Right.
in the house. That's good. That's good advice. Grandpa?
With all of the inflation that I've lived through, I think it's very, very important for parents to teach the children the value of money, what items need to be bought, what items are just luxuries that maybe would be wiser not having. And finally, above all, don't ever leave out the giving to your church. God gave, and you owe him a certain part back.
Driving to Minnesota all the time was stressful.
What made it stressful?
You never know what could happen.
Well,
Of course, you pray that all goes well, and it did.
but we would generally spend 2 weeks up in Minnesota. Mark was born in 1956. You can check when disposable diapers came into being, and therefore all the extra luggage that you had to pack, which is rather much different today. So that would be one thing in terms of any trips. And we made the trip to Minnesota at least once every year. And one year we made that trip by car 5 times. The interstate, well, the first trip we made, because I didn't want interstate, I was afraid of it coming from gravel roads on the farm. There were interstates in Detroit when I came here. So, having driven in the interstate in Detroit with all the traffic, we decided we were going to make sure we avoided heavy traffic. And therefore, our first trip to Minnesota went to Valpo, Indiana, across Indiana, across the middle of Illinois, into Iowa, and then from Iowa north to Minnesota. Believe me, we avoided all major cities, but it took us 2 days.
Do you know how many hours? It's a
Uh,
2-day trip.
I would think it would have been in the 20s,
Yeah. That's a big difference.
because at that time, obviously on 2-lane roads, the speed limit was 60 max.
Yeah.
And of course, back at that time, you always had to be concerned about tires, because tires were the one thing that would wear out often.
Thank you again for the interview. It's always a pleasure talking to both of you. Just want to say I love you.
I love
Love you
all
too.
of our family members. It was a blessing to have the 3 kids and now the grandkids and the great-grandkids. It's been really a joy. And our pastor last Sunday made a comment that I felt really made that so clear. We were talking about Revelations, and Revelations dwells on the end. And a lot of people are saying, oh, the end is coming right now and right now. And Pastor made it a point that he's hoping the end doesn't come for a long time, because he's hoping that his grandchildren and great-grandchildren have a chance to also get to meet Jesus.